The clink of silverware and the low hum of conversation filled the room, but I barely tasted my food. My family dinners had always been a little awkward, but tonight, something felt different, like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. I tried to ignore the tension, focusing on the mashed potatoes swirling on my plate, but curiosity got the better of me. I looked up, forcing a smile, and asked, "So, just tell me when the reunion is. I'll make sure to clear my schedule." For a moment, the table went silent. My brother, Mark, didn't even look up from his phone. He just smirked, then finally met my eyes with a coldness I'd never seen before. "You're not invited," he said, his voice flat and final like he was stating a fact instead of delivering a blow. The words hung in the air, heavier than any silence I'd ever known. My fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. I looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to say it was a joke, but no one met my gaze. My mother stared at her lap, my father cleared his throat, and my sister busied herself with her napkin. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with secrets and shame. I wanted to ask why, to demand an explanation, but my voice caught in my throat. In that moment I realized something had shifted forever. I never imagined my own brother would betray me like this. It wasn't always like this. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my family was the kind you see in old photo albums, smiling faces, arms slung around each other, laughter echoing through every memory. Our reunions were legendary, at least in our little world. Every summer, we'd pack up the car and drive out to my grandparents' house by the lake. The air always smelled like pine needles and sunscreen, and the day stretched out, golden and endless. Mark and I were inseparable back then. He was my partner in crime, my confidant, the one who'd sneak me extra marshmallows when we made s'mores by the fire. We'd stay up late, whispering secrets and making plans for the future, promising we'd always have each other's backs. I remember one year, when a sudden thunderstorm ruined our picnic, Mark grabbed my hand and we raced through the rain, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. We collapsed under the porch, soaked and shivering, but happier than I'd ever been. That was the kind of bond we had, unbreakable, or so I thought. Our family had its quirks, sure. My dad was strict about curfews, my mom obsessed over holiday menus, and my sister Emily always wanted to be the center of attention. But underneath it all, there was love. We had traditions, Friday night movies, Sunday morning pancakes, and, of course, the annual reunion. It was the one time of year when everyone put aside their differences and came together no matter what. I used to count down the days, planning what I'd wear, what stories I'd tell, and which games I'd challenge Mark to. We'd compete in everything from canoe races to pie-eating contests, and even when I lost, he let me wear his victory medal for a day. Those moments felt like proof that, no matter how crazy life got, my family would always be my safe place. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. The laughter faded, replaced by tense silences and forced smiles. Mark grew distant, spending more time with his friends and less with me. Family dinners became battlegrounds, with old arguments resurfacing and new grudges taking root. I tried to ignore it, to hold on to the memories of better days, but the cracks were impossible to miss. Now, sitting at that dinner table, I felt the weight of everything we'd lost. The warmth that once filled our home had been replaced by a coldness I couldn't explain. I looked at Mark and wondered how the boy who used to chase me through thunderstorms could look at me with such indifference. What had happened to us? What had I done to deserve this? The questions circled in my mind, but the answers felt just out of reach. All I knew was that something precious had slipped through my fingers, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. Looking back, I realized the signs were there long before that dinner. They crept in quietly, like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor is already warped. At first, it was little things, missed calls from Mark that he never returned, texts that went unanswered for days. I'd tell myself he was just busy, that work or school or life was getting in the way. But the excuses started to wear thin, especially when I saw him posting photos with friends, laughing at parties I hadn't even heard about. Then there were the inside jokes. At family gatherings, Mark and Emily would exchange glances and burst out laughing at something I didn't understand. When I asked what was so funny, they'd shrug it off. "Oh, it's nothing. Just something from last week." I smile and pretend it didn't bother me. But the truth was, I felt like an outsider in my own family. Even my parents seemed to be in on it sometimes, sharing knowing looks across the table while I sat there, trying to piece together what I'd missed. The group chat was the final straw. We'd always had a family group chat, silly memes, updates about grandma, reminders about birthdays. One day, I opened my phone and realized I hadn't seen a notification in weeks. When I searched for the chat, it was gone. I texted Mark, asking if something was wrong with my phone, but he just replied, "Maybe you should check your settings." I tried to laugh it off, but the pit in my stomach grew heavier. I started to notice other things too. Plans were made without me, movie nights, weekend trips, even simple dinners. I'd hear about them after the fact, usually from Emily's social media. When I confronted her, she'd say, "Oh, I thought Mark told you," or "It was just a last-minute thing." I wanted to believe her, but the pattern was too obvious to ignore. I tried to rationalize it all. Maybe I'd been too busy myself. Maybe I'd missed a message or forgotten an invitation. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more isolated I felt. The warmth and closeness I'd always counted on had been replaced by a chill I couldn't shake. Sometimes, late at night, I'd replay old conversations in my head, searching for the moment things changed. Was it something I said? Something I did? I couldn't find a single answer, just a growing sense of unease. It was like standing outside a house you used to live in, peering through the windows and realizing you no longer belonged. I told myself it was just a phase, that things would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong. I just didn't know how bad it would get. The silence after Mark's words was suffocating. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for someone to laugh and say it was all a joke, but no one did. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass, and my father's eyes darted to the window, as if he could escape through the glass. Emily kept her head down, picking at her food like she was suddenly fascinated by a piece of broccoli. I felt the world tilt beneath me, the ground shifting in a way that made me dizzy. I tried to steady my voice, but it came out thin and shaky. "What do you mean, I'm not invited? It's the family reunion." "I'm family." Mark didn't flinch. He just shrugged, his expression unreadable. "We thought it would be better this way. Less drama." "Less drama?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What drama? What are you talking about?" He finally looked at me, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or regret. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You know what I mean," he said, his tone cold. "After everything that happened last year, we just thought it would be best if you sat this one out." I searched the faces around the table, desperate for someone to contradict him, to tell me I was overreacting, but all I saw was avoidance. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, my father's jaw clenched tight. Emily wouldn't even look at me. The betrayal stung, sharp and raw like a fresh wound. "What happened last year?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You mean when I called out Mark for lying about the money? When I tried to help Dad with his business and everyone accused me of meddling? Is that what this is about?" Mark rolled his eyes. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You always have to make everything about you. You can't just let things go." I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. I was trying to help. I thought that's what family was supposed to do. My father finally spoke, his voice low and tired. "We just want some peace, honey. Things have been tense enough." I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of support, but she just shook her head, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Maybe it's for the best. Just this once, she whispered. The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I could barely breathe. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. So that's it? I'm just out? No discussion, no explanation, no one answered. The silence was louder than any argument. I stood there, feeling exposed and alone like a stranger in my own family. My mind raced, replaying every moment from the past year, searching for the thing I'd done that was so unforgivable. I thought about the missed calls, the group chat, the inside jokes. It all made sense now. They'd been shutting me out for months, and I'd been too blind to see it. I wanted to fight, to make them see how much this hurt, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Their minds were made up. I grabbed my bag and walked out, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the hallway. No one followed me. No one called my name. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp, stinging my cheeks as I tried to hold back tears. I stood on the porch, staring up at the stars, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I thought about the little girl who used to race through thunderstorms with her brother, who believed family was forever. I felt foolish for ever thinking I belonged. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Sorry you had to find out like this. That was it. No explanation, no comfort. Just a cold confirmation that I was truly alone. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind spun with questions, with anger, with heartbreak. How could they do this to me? How could Mark, of all people, turn everyone against me? I thought I knew my family, but now I wasn't sure I knew them at all. But as I sat there, replaying every word, every look, a new thought crept in, one that chilled me to the bone. What if there was more to this than I realized? What if the real reason they excluded me was even worse than I thought? I barely remember driving home that night. The world outside my windshield blurred into streaks of light and shadow, my mind replaying the dinner over and over like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. By the time I reached my apartment, my face was streaked with tears I hadn't even realized were falling. I sat in the dark for a long time, keys still in my hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How could my own family, my brother, my parents, my sister turn on me so completely? The silence in my apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and chaos that used to fill our home. I tried to tell myself it was a misunderstanding, that someone would call or text to explain, to apologize, to say it had all been a terrible mistake. But my phone stayed stubbornly silent. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over Mark's name, then Emily's, then Mom's. I typed out a dozen messages. Can we talk? Please tell me what's going on. I don't understand, but I deleted every one before hitting send. What was the point? They made it clear where I stood. The next morning, I woke up hoping it would all feel less real, but the ache in my chest was still there, heavy and unrelenting. I went through the motions, shower, coffee, pretending to care about work emails, but my mind kept drifting back to my family. I thought about all the times we crowded around the kitchen table, arguing over board games, teasing each other, sharing stories. I remembered the warmth of those moments, the feeling of belonging, and I wondered if I'd ever feel that way again. Desperate for answers, I finally texted Emily. Can we talk? I just want to understand. She replied hours later, a single line. I think it's better if we all take some space. The words stung, but I tried to convince myself she was just caught in the middle, that maybe she'd come around. I called my mom, but she let it go to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling, asking her to call me back. She never did. That's when I noticed something strange on my phone. A notification from a group chat I didn't recognize, one I'd never seen before. My heart pounded as I opened it, realizing it was a new family group chat. My name wasn't in the title. I scrolled up, my hands shaking, and saw message after message about the reunion, about plans, about me. Mark had written, "Let's just keep her out of it this year. She always makes things complicated." Emily had replied, I agree, it's less stressful without her. Even my mom had chimed in, maybe it's for the best. She needs to learn. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They weren't just excluding me, they were talking about me, making decisions about my place in the family without even giving me a chance to defend myself. The loneliness was overwhelming, a cold emptiness that settled deep in my bones. I thought about all the times I'd felt left out lately, all the little signs I'd ignored, and realized they'd been building this wall for months, maybe longer. I curled up on my couch, clutching my phone, and let the tears come. I never felt so alone, so betrayed, so utterly lost. The togetherness I'd always cherished was gone, replaced by a silence that felt like it might swallow me whole. I spent the next few days in a fog, drifting through work and life like a ghost. But beneath the sadness, something else began to take root, a slow-burning anger, a need for answers that wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't accept that my family would turn on me without reason. There had to be more to the story, something I was missing. I decided I wouldn't just sit back and let them erase me. If they wanted to shut me out, I was going to find out why. I started with Emily. I waited until I knew she'd be home alone, then called her, refusing to let it go to voicemail. When she finally picked up, her voice was wary. What do you want, Anna? I want the truth, I said, my voice steady. Why is everyone acting like I'm the villain? What did I do that was so unforgivable? There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, the faint sound of a TV in the background. Mark said you tried to sabotage Dad's business last year. That you told people he was stealing money. Mom and Dad believed him. I didn't know what to think. My heart pounded. That's not true. I never said that. I tried to help Dad when he was struggling. Mark was the one who... I stopped myself, suddenly realizing how deep the lies must have gone. Did anyone ever ask me my side? Emily was quiet. Mark said you'd just deny it. He said you were jealous because he was helping Dad more than you were. I felt sick. All this time, I'd been blamed for something I didn't do, and no one had even bothered to ask me if it was true. I thanked Emily for her honesty, even though it hurt, and hung up. My anger sharpened into resolve. I needed to talk to my parents. I drove to their house, rehearsing what I'd say. When my mom opened the door, she looked surprised and a little guilty. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, his face unreadable. I need to talk to you, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. About what happened last year. About what Mark told you. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. I told them everything. How I tried to help. How I'd never accused anyone of stealing. How Mark had twisted my words. I showed them old emails and texts, proof that I'd only ever wanted to support the family. My mom's eyes filled with tears as she read them. My dad's face softened, but he still looked uncertain. Why didn't you come to me? I asked, my voice breaking. Why did you just believe him? My mom shook her head. We didn't want to believe it, but Mark was so convincing. He said you were trying to turn us against each other. We didn't know what to think. I felt a wave of sadness, but also relief. At least now, the truth was out in the open. I would never hurt this family, I said quietly. I just wanted to help. My parents apologized, but the damage was done. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the cracks in our trust. Still, I knew I couldn't let Mark get away with this. I needed to clear my name, not just for me, but for the family I still loved, even if they'd hurt me. I started gathering evidence, old messages, financial records, anything that could prove my innocence and show what Mark had really done. I reached out to people who'd been around during the business troubles, piecing together the real story. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how far Mark had gone to protect himself, spinning lies and manipulating everyone around him. But as I dug deeper, I started to sense that Mark was onto me. He stopped answering my calls, blocked me on social media, and even warned Emily to stay away from me. The tension in the family grew, and I knew I was getting close to something big, something Mark desperately wanted to keep hidden. I was determined to see this through, no matter what it cost. But I had no idea how far my brother would go to keep his secret. I knew I couldn't let this fester any longer. The truth was finally within reach, and I was done letting Mark control the narrative. I spent days gathering every piece of evidence I could find, emails, text messages, even old voicemails from Dad asking for my help with the business. I printed everything out, highlighted the parts that mattered, and put it all in a folder. My hands shook as I did it, but I felt a strange sense of power too. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting, I was taking action. I called my parents and asked them to come over. I told Emily she needed to be there too. And then, with my heart pounding, I called Mark. He sounded annoyed, but I insisted. "You owe me this," I said, my voice steady. "If you have nothing to hide, you'll show up." He hung up without answering, but I knew he'd come. Mark never could resist being the center of attention. That evening, my living room felt like a courtroom. My parents sat on the couch, Emily perched nervously on the armrest, and Mark stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw set. I took a deep breath and faced them all. "I know you've all heard things about me," I began, my voice trembling but clear. "But you haven't heard my side. Tonight, you're going to." I handed out copies of the emails and texts, explaining each one. I showed how I'd tried to help Dad with the business, how I'd never accused anyone of stealing, how Mark had twisted my words. I read out loud the message where Mark told Emily I was jealous and trying to cause trouble. I watched as my parents' faces shifted from confusion to shock to something like shame. Mark tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "You've had your say for months. Now it's my turn." He glared at me, but I pressed on. "I know you told everyone I was sabotaging the family, but the truth is, you were the one hiding things. You were the one who made mistakes with Dad's business, and instead of owning up to it, you blamed me." The room was silent except for Emily's quiet sniffles. My mother looked at Mark, her eyes pleading. "Is this true?" Mark's face twisted with anger. "You always take her side. She's always been your favorite." "I did what I had to do because no one ever listens to me. Anna gets all the credit, all the attention. I'm just the screw-up, right?" I stared at him, stunned. "This isn't about favorites, Mark. This is about the truth. You lied to everyone, and you let me take the fall." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're so perfect. You always have to be the hero. I was just trying to protect myself. I knew if Dad found out about the money, he'd never trust me again. So yeah, I lied, but you're not innocent either. You always act like you're better than the rest of us." The words hit me like a slap, but I refused to back down. I never wanted to be better than anyone. I just wanted us to be honest with each other. I wanted us to be a family. My dad finally spoke, his voice heavy with regret. "Mark, why didn't you come to me? Why did you let this go so far?" Mark's eyes filled with tears, but he wiped them away angrily. "Because I was scared, okay? I was scared you'd hate me. I was scared Anna would take my place. I've always felt like I was on the outside, and when things went wrong, I panicked." Emily reached out and touched his arm. "We're supposed to be in this together. You didn't have to lie." The room was thick with emotion, anger, sadness, relief, and something like hope. My parents looked at each other, then at me, then at Mark. I could see them struggling, torn between love and disappointment, between the child who lied and the one who'd been hurt. "I'm sorry," Mark said finally, his voice breaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. For a moment I thought that was it, that the truth was finally out, that we could start to heal." But then Mark looked at me, his eyes hardening. "But you're not as innocent as you think, Anna. There's something you don't know. Something I've kept quiet for years." The room went still, my heart pounded in my chest. "What are you talking about?" Mark took a deep breath, his gaze locked on mine. "You want the whole truth? Fine. I'll tell you. But after this, nothing will ever be the same. And then my brother said something that changed everything. The days that followed felt like living in the aftermath of a storm. Everything was quieter, but nothing was quite the same. Mark's confession had shattered the illusion we'd all been clinging to. My parents were stunned, struggling to process the depth of his lies and the pain they caused. My mother called me the next morning, her voice thick with tears, apologizing over and over for believing the worst about me. My father, always the stoic one, simply hugged me when we met, holding on a little longer than usual, as if trying to make up for all the times he hadn't. Emily was the first to reach out, texting me late at night. "I'm so sorry. I should have asked you. I should have known." We met for coffee, and for the first time in months we talked honestly about Mark, about the family, about how easy it is to let fear and jealousy twist the truth. She promised to do better, and I believed her. Mark, on the other hand, kept his distance. He sent a short message, "I'm sorry for everything," but I could tell he was still wrestling with his own guilt and shame. My parents decided he needed to face the consequences of his actions. They asked him to move out for a while, to give everyone space to heal. It wasn't easy, and it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. Family dinners were different after that. The laughter was softer, the conversations more careful. There was a new honesty between us, but also a wariness, as if we were all afraid of reopening old wounds. I missed the easy closeness we once had, but I knew things could never go back to the way they were. Too much had been said, too much trust broken. Yet, in the midst of all that pain, I found something I hadn't expected, a sense of self-respect I'd never really known before. For so long, I tried to keep the peace, to be the one who held the family together, even at my own expense. Standing up for myself, demanding the truth, refusing to accept blame for things I hadn't done, changed me. I realized I didn't need to be perfect, or to carry everyone else's burdens. I just needed to be honest, with them and with myself. I still loved my family, even with all their flaws. But I understood now that love didn't mean letting myself be mistreated or misunderstood. It meant setting boundaries, speaking up, and sometimes letting go of the version of family I'd always wanted in order to accept the one I actually had. We were all different now, scarred maybe, but also stronger. The old family dynamic was gone, replaced by something messier but more real. And as painful as it was, I knew I'd never trade the truth for the comfort of a lie again. Looking back, I realized family isn't just about blood or shared memories. It's about trust, honesty, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened, but now I know it's about letting go of the pain while still holding people accountable. Standing up for myself wasn't easy, especially when it meant challenging the people I loved most. But in the end, it was the only way to reclaim my voice and my dignity. I've learned that sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones we least expect. Betrayal by family cuts deep, but it also reveals who we are and what we're willing to fight for. Healing doesn't happen overnight, and forgiveness doesn't erase the scars. But it does make room for something new, self-respect, resilience, and maybe, one day, a different kind of closeness. If you're watching this and you've ever felt betrayed or silenced by someone you love, know that you're not alone. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even when it feels impossible. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most important growth. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you love? Tell your story in the comments. I want to hear from you, and so do others who need to know they're not alone.